So when I think about crowdsourcing, I think about the crowd reporting issues directly with a responsible party. So a really common one that we see is simply tweeting at the organisation that you might have an issue with. An organisation can actually be quite quick to respond if they know that everyone is watching. But some organisations will also put out dedicated apps where I can report the issue, and there's a bit more structure involved. So they've asked me to define the type of issue, describe the issue, and confirm the location, and perhaps prompt me to upload a photo. And the app at the back end might actually tie into the agency's work order system, and then someone goes out and fixes that particular issue, and the work order is resolved, and then the app itself might also notify me, the citizen, that the issue has now been resolved. And there's a variety of different types of apps that allow you to do these kind of standard crowdsourcing techniques, but I think there's also a more sneaky side to crowdsourcing. So the crowd might be unaware that they're actually taking part, but by using an application, they could be taking part in a much larger scale of data collection and essentially crowdsourcing. For example, here we have collected tweets just along the main road corridors around Melbourne just during the peak hours. The word cloud there indicating the reoccurring words that are in those tweets. But for me, this was just a fun project, but it was really interesting to see that the hotspots of tweet activity were around the major intersections. So, putting two and two together here, you're waiting for the light to turn green, time to check what's on social media, and it's time for a quick tweet. You could essentially even use this information against the crowd, perhaps target unmarked police patrols in these particular areas. Strava is an app that lets you track your bike rides using your phone. And Strava Metro is a data service that provides a really in-depth look at how cyclists are behaving in your city. So by default, myself included, if you're using the Strava app, you're passively providing this crowdsourced data. Now here in Melbourne, we have the Principal Bicycle Network, which is an excellent network of cycle routes that provide access to the major destinations across Melbourne. And along with this, Vic Roads, who are responsible for this layer, have identified roads that should have the bicycle priority elevated. This then leads to those roads being prioritised for improving the bike lanes or having dedicated off-road bike paths. And from what I understand, a lot of work goes into keeping this layer current with the ever-changing city. It's an ongoing activity to keep it in sync with the changing patterns of the different transport demands, but also the shifting demographics, gentrification and urban sprawl. And look, we do have, last I looked, just over 100 bike counters across the city, but these are at fixed locations. They report the volumes of bikes travelling over those fixed locations and only at those fixed locations. Now, where I really think the passive data that's collected through Strava is for this type of planning. To me, the real advantage that Strava brings is it gives you this view across the entire geographical region. And to me, this is a fairly pretty heat map, but it's data that you get from the Strava Metro product. So you can actually filter this down to see how the different types of bicyclists, so in this case, the commuters, how are they travelling around the city? Or perhaps compare recreational versus commuter patterns to see where are the different kind of hotspot areas that they're riding around. And the data is also temporal. So you can actually get an understanding of the origins and the destinations and how riders flow through your streets. What percentage of riders are actually using that Principal Bicycle Network. Identify bottlenecks and pinch points as everyone's trying to commute to the CBD at the same time. Perhaps aggregate longer time periods to see how behaviour has changed over the years or over the months and see where ridership is increasing and decreasing, perhaps by postcode. Now, combined with GIS, this data can be used to answer all sorts of questions, and there's a wide variety of projects that have been done with Strava Metro, but one that I thought was a really good case study was so a few years back in Queensland, end of 2010, we had some real devastating floods which caused a lot of damage, which included knocking out all of the infrastructure along the river. So the Department of Transport and Main Roads, they put in some new and improved infrastructure which included a new bicycle path network. So using the Strava Metro product, they were able to do a before and after analysis to determine how this new infrastructure had changed the biking behaviour and essentially be able to measure the success of the project. Now Waze is a really good example, in my opinion, of being both an active and a passive crowdsourcing tool. So we have over, at the time of recording, 25,000 active Waze users within the greater Melbourne region, and primarily they're all using it to work together to try and beat the traffic. Now users can submit a variety of different incidents that they come across, and looking at the last 3 or 4 weeks of data within Melbourne, the crowd are actively reporting around 1,000 jams a day, around 30 accidents a day, and around 150 hazards a day. And each of these can also be broken down into further subcategories. So again, on average, around 50% of the hazards that are being reported are actually cars stopped on the hard shoulder, or vehicles. Now Waze has this two-way data exchange program. Now this is targeted at government agencies that possess some form of real-time traffic-related data. Now this is entirely free and involves signing a two-way data agreement. Now you, as the transport agency, need to provide some form of real-time feed of transport information. In this case I've got closures and incidents, but if you're a City of Melbourne, it could be your parking sensors. It's usually a transport agency, but it could be cities as well. And in return, Waze will provide you with their anonymous real-time feeds of both the alerts that are actively being captured by the Wazers, but also the passively collected slowdown information. So just by having the Waze app on in your car, as you start to de-accelerate in traffic, that's processed at the Waze end, and if there's a number of vehicles doing that, that feed of information is then sent back to you to do as you please. Now, ESRI technology helps organisations get the most out of this partnership with Waze. Now, Geo Open Data lets you get your data from your existing systems over to Waze. On the right we have the Geo Event Server. Now this is our real-time GIS component, and at a very simple level it lets you ingest that Waze feed of information and perhaps persist it into your GIS system, but it really does a lot more than that. It allows you to do more advanced on-the-fly analytics, so incident detection and notification, and I'll touch on this at the end of the presentation. And of course the layers of information can then be overlaid and interrogated from perhaps your existing transport management system, or determine emerging hotspots of incidents as they're occurring across your network. Also, verify incidents against other sources. So I know in Sydney, 30% of crashes were being reported in Waze before they were being raised in the 000 system. I thought that was an incredible stat. Now here's a series of web apps. This is a dashboard showing the last 30 minutes of Waze activity here in Melbourne. We've got some widgets on the left here showing the breakdown of the different types of incidents, and those will change as the map view changes. So that's just flashing the ones that are at standstill traffic. The bottom left there we can see just on the approach to the bridge, there is the red line there, that's a slowdown of traffic that's coming from the Waze feed. This is the Vic Roads CCTV camera where you can see there's some slowdown. And also that's a Waze user who's actually not only reported an incident but uploaded a photo. Here it's just another simple web app. On the left is the Waze slowdown information, the passively collected information from the Waze users. And on the right is the Bluetooth sensor network from Vic Roads, and it's been filtered down just to show the roads that have got some congestion on, and it allows us to sort of see any discrepancies between those two. This web app is looking at about 3 weeks worth of data, and these hex bins are just allowing us to aggregate those results into the hex bins to show how many incidents are behind them. But then as we zoom in, we can actually sort of slice and dice through the temporal data to see what incidents there were on each of these days, and the slowdown information as well that's behind that. If you have BI tools like Cognos, or in this case Microsoft Power BI, ESRI also has components that feed into those BI tools, which then allows you to get your Waze data not only into the GIS but into the hands of your business analysts. This is a dashboard that I created, so it's not the most attractive of dashboards, but you kind of get how you can interrogate the data, and all of these other panels within this particular dashboard will respond to what you're doing either in the map or from the panels themselves. And here we've got the Vic Roads VMAP application. This is just simply showing their dynamic roadworks and events, the green layer, and also the Waze data as a series of blue dots, and also they've clustered the ones into these orange and red dots where there's a large number of incidents that are together, and again a time slider there just so they can slice and dice through the data. But to me, it's not just about visualizing the data, it's really acting upon it and getting some value out of it. So using that Geo Event Server application, we can actually perform some real-time analytics and alerting. So just as an example, here we have quite a notorious bridge in Melbourne, the Montague Bridge, and there's a number of high vehicles that have been colliding with this guy. So what we can do is you can set up geofences around your areas of interest. So this could be bridges, could be level crossings, and each of these can have different priorities associated with them as well. And then in the Geo Event application, what you can do is string together what we call Geo Event Services. Now these continuously run and in real time, and they're just listening out for when certain conditions occur. So in this instance, if someone happens to report an accident and it happens to fall within one of those geofenced areas, this is going to trigger for an SMS to be sent to the relevant people that need to be alerted, and it'll contain a summary of that incident and a link to open it up on a map. For emergency response, you might have a Wazer who reports an accident, and again you can have a Geo Event service that's set up and it's just listening. In this case it's listening for a Waze incident that's of type accident major, and there's also a confidence and a reliability score behind Waze incidents. You could also say, well look, we're only interested in the ones that are of a high confidence, and if so, when that happens, run a geoprocessing task to find out, well, all right, what's the nearest ambulance to this particular incident, and then that result can then feed into another system to say, well look, we know that this is the nearest ambulance, but the radio ID is in a different business system. Can you look that up, and then can you push a route to that ambulance to respond? And these services are very easy to design, to kind of a GUI based interface, drag and drop. These are just some concepts, but you can imagine, there's all sorts of scenarios that you could detect and act upon. So the fact that we're seeing a lot of vehicles stopped on the hard shoulder, a Geo Event service that if a vehicle has been stopped on the hard shoulder of a primary road for longer than 30 minutes, do something about it. Or someone reports a pothole, automatically generate a work order in your separate work order system. So that's it. Feel free to use the comments for any questions, but also happy to if you want to reach out to me to discuss this further. Thanks.